The Pixies went supernova in 1999 as their song ended the Fight Club movie starring Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. The song asked the simple question, "Where's my mind?" What I want to ask in this video is something similar. Where's my wonder? Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear in two playlists here on the channel. Pardon me. Number one being the poetry discussion playlist, now over 700 videos strong. But number two is the Emily Dickinson playlist, a playlist that is ever growing and dedicated to the greatest poet that ever was. Emily Dickinson, of course. And the poem in question today is titled, by its first line, as all Emily Dickinson poems are, "It Troubled Me as Once I Was," and it reads as such. It troubled me as once I was, for I was once a child, concluding how an atom fell, and yet the heavens held. The heavens weighed the most by far, yet blue and solid stood. Without a bolt that I could prove, would giants understand? Life set me larger problems, some I shall keep to solve till algebra is easier, or simpler proved above. Then, to be comprehended, what sorer puzzled me. Why heaven did not break away and tumble blue on me. This is the wonderment of a child. How is it that atoms decay, atoms fall apart, but that big old heaven above us, it stays together? And further, how is it that heaven and blue are one? And heaven does not fade away, further away from us, and cast the blue upon us. Now, there's a lot of things that we can talk about with this poem. Probably one of the least discussed Emily Dickinson poems, at least to my findings. And I don't want to talk about minutia with this one. Where I want to stay is with that child's sense of wonder. Here, Emily Dickinson is sort of splitting a couple of what-ifs that a child might come upon in their wanderings from day to day. The wanderings of a child are, simply put, bigger than most adults. You know, I've told this story on the channel before, but one of my earliest memories, and if I am correct in diagnosing this memory, it must have been 3 or 4 years old, was absolutely losing my mind, running off and crying in a corner because I could not come to terms with the idea of eternity. I think a lot of people probably have that in the opposite effect. I think a lot of kids have trouble with the idea of death, right? Most people have trouble with the idea of death. I would love for you to tell me that I'm not alone in my fear of the eternal as a child, because I haven't met anyone who ever assuaged my concerns there, that it's strange that I was preoccupied with fear of the eternal as opposed to fear of the death, but it didn't make sense to me. What if, so the idea of heaven, and as a child, I was pretty sure I was going to heaven. Now, who knows? There's time yet. The idea of going to heaven was never accompanied with the idea, for example, of sleep. Was never accompanied with the idea, for example, of alone time. Was never accompanied with the idea, for example, what if sometimes you can't look me in the eyes and tell me sometimes you don't just get tired of life. Everyone does. What if you get tired of heaven? All of those things have zero answer if eternity means eternity. I could not come to terms with the idea that forever has already begun. Because that's the thing, there's no getting out. There's no stopping it now. You're born, and now it's always. Then life happens. Those questions don't really come up anymore. Those questions don't really happen. And I think that there is something to be said for the dulling of the mind that dulls wonderment as well. Maybe. Maybe it's just that as you stop learning new things, your young brain is accompanied with all sorts of need to learn. But as you go on, you don't really have it as much. You know the way to work. You know where you live. You know your significant other's name. There's no more learning to be had. You go to work and you manufacture your widgets, whatever it is. But I think there's something slightly different at play there. This is a word that has been getting a lot of play on the internet lately, especially with the reemergence, discovery of some old hieroglyphics in Egypt that really look like a helicopter, and I would say a car or a boat, and also what I would say is a B-52 bomber. They really do look that way. I think it's almost impossible not to at least acknowledge that they look that way. But it is a word known as pareidolia. Pareidolia. Which is a psychological phenomenon where the brain interprets random, ambiguous images or patterns as recognizable shapes, objects, or faces. It's not a clinical diagnosis or a disorder, but a normal cognitive function. The term pareidolia comes from the Greek words para, beside, and eidolon, image. Why do I think that these are the same things? Well, because I think that there is a mechanism in our mind for curiosity, but the curiosity mechanism is often reformulated in life to come with the expectation of an answer. Some people don't really have that. These are your Roswell believers. These are your Bigfoot believers. These are your moon landing deniers. And I'm not judging those people. I'm in some of those camps. I'm just saying that when you assume there will be an answer, the way your mind will see a face where a clump of clay exists, where your mind will witness a rabbit in a cloud where only moisture exists. In these same ways, when a question like the uncomfortability offered by the idea of eternity shows up, it shows up ready-made with an answer. Even if that answer is poorly formed, we do not really dig into the question deep enough to understand how poorly formulated our answer may or may not be. And this, in my opinion, is also similar to something else, something that comes to us from Jung. Jung gave us the idea of archetypes. Two archetypes in specific for this conversation. One, the fool. The fool is the individual who can say the truest things because he's not to be taken too seriously. Or is he? The fool, willing to be laughed at, willing, by the way, to be wrong. And the savior or the wise old man, however it is that you see this archetype. The wise old man, the hallmark of wisdom, as we learn from the ancient Greeks, what it is that makes you wise is knowing how little you know. These two things are in essence very similar. We have a quote from Jung about just that. The fool is the symbolic precursor of the Savior. He is both the lowest and the highest. I think that this sense of wonder must remain alive in us for wisdom to follow, for wisdom to be a real part of who it is that we are. I think that this sense of wonder, of being willing to play with those bigger ideas in your mind and not have to have a conclusion, I think this makes us something closer to greatness, closer to the divine, and not further away. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. There's poetry every Monday, and as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.